We can all agree that the 2020s are off to a pretty rough start. Between a global pandemic, the death of traditional cinema, and the accursed Zoom, 2021 could not come any sooner. Now you may ask, but Ouji, how will 2021 be any different? Well, my friend, 2021 shall be christened with the long-awaited second season of Dr. Stone, and with it, science shall once again bless the anime community. You know, along with whatever foolishness happens to be trending on Twitter. But with 5 months before the first episode, I thought I'd go over the upcoming arc and what fans can expect in the next season. So in this video, I'll discuss the new characters, the improvement with fights, and which chapter the season will likely end on. Be warned that this video does contain spoilers for both seasons of the anime. Before I get started, make sure to comment with why you're excited for season 2. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week in the next video. This week's comment comes from Saxy, who reminded us that One Piece is the one true religion. If you'd like regular One Piece and Dr. Stone videos like this one, then make sure to subscribe so you can follow along with each week's video. With that out of the way, let's look at the new characters fans can expect to see in Season 2. Now, most of these characters actually appeared in Season 1, so we can't really call them brand new. Even so, we'll see much more of these characters than we did before. On that note, the first character we can expect to see is Homura. Homura is currently spying on the Kingdom of Science, so this means Senku needs to stop her from revealing their cell phone to Tsukasa. This will be pretty difficult given that Homura is a talented gymnast whose agility even rivals that of Kohaku. Keep in mind that while she doesn't have much to say, Homura has a very interesting relationship with Hyoga, but we'll cover Hyoga a bit later. Let's move on to a very familiar friend, Taiju. We've already seen a lot from Taiju, but remember, it's been almost a year since he and Senku saw each other. So when they finally make contact, Taiju is so happy to hear from his buddy that he's literally at a loss for words. And just like before, Taiju will once again serve as the shield of the group. He protects his friends, and like Senku, he wants to save as many people as he possibly can. Of course, with the return of Taiju, we also get to see another personal favorite, Yuzuriha. Unfortunately, we didn't see a whole lot from her in Season 1, but Yuzuriha is a major character in Season 2. She may not be the most outspoken, but Yuzuriha uses her crafting skills to support the group, and even works together with Kaseki to combine their crafting skills. Yuzuriha also happens to be one of the funniest characters in the story. Whether she's reacting to Taiju's foolishness or showing her love for crafts, Yuzuriha is guaranteed to get a laugh every time. But now let's look at one more familiar character, Hyoga. In Season 1, we learn that Hyoga is the strongest fighter after Tsukasa. But while Tsukasa may be stronger, Hyoga is definitely more cruel. He was willing to burn down the village, and he had no problem watching his soldiers die right before him. So while Tsukasa is the biggest threat to the Kingdom of Science, they also need to be cautious of Hyoga since he seems to have a certain disregard for the lives of others. So with the more familiar characters covered, now let's discuss the newer ones. In the trailer, the first one we're shown is Nikki. Nikki is the one who's been in charge of watching over Taiju and Yuzuriha. Oddly enough, Nikki is somewhat similar to Taiju. She's not a meathead like Taiju, but she's a strong character whose sincere personality can be seen right away. While she can be a very intense character, Nikki is someone who is actually very sensitive. After Nikki, the second character we see in the trailer is Yo. And to be quite honest, you really don't need to worry too much about Yo. Yo works as a guard in Tsukasa's empire. Aside from that, he doesn't do a whole lot until much later in the story. Finally, the third character shown in the trailer is Ukyo. Now, Ukyo actually had a couple of cameos in the first season, but he's actually a breath of fresh air among the characters. While the other fighters all use swords or spears, Ukyo actually specializes in fighting with a bow. This specialization comes with both strong hearing and strong eyesight. But while Ukyo is clearly a serious threat, he also has a strong sense of right and wrong. Without spoiling too much, I have a feeling Ukyo will quickly become the best boy of 2021. While there are plenty more characters that we'll get to see, these are the ones who will make major impacts on the story one way or another. And just like in Season 1, you'll eventually invest in these characters because of their familiar hopes and dreams. Now that I've covered the new characters, let's discuss the fights and animation. As fans are well aware, fights are not the selling point of Dr. Stone. There are many fighters, but the core of Dr. Stone is always scientific progress. But this doesn't mean there aren't any important fights. While Season 1 is praised for its stunning backgrounds and great soundtrack, the animation is admittedly the anime's weakest aspect. One exception though is when Kohaku confronts Tsukasa, which actually has some solid animation. But for the most part, Season 1 often resorts to copying the manga and using jump cuts. Now, without going on too much of a rant, the studio seems to have been more concerned with offering realistic portrayals of the experiments and less concerned with the actual animation. But this raises an important question. If Season 2 is centered around a war between the two factions, how will this affect the animation? Personally, I suspect that there will be an improvement in the fight animation because the inventions we see are all geared towards the fights. In Season 1, the inventions were just there to build up the village. Things like ramen, sulfuric acid, and medicine don't necessarily need to have top-tier animation. But in Stone Wars, when the new inventions are all used for fighting, the reasonable expectation would be that any scene with these inventions will actually have some solid animation. If the studio focuses on the scenes with inventions, then it wouldn't make too much sense for them to neglect those scenes where Senku and his friends are actually using the inventions. Of course, this is just a prediction and I have no way of knowing for sure. It could also be the case that the animation is just the same as it was in Season 1. While this wouldn't necessarily hurt Season 2, it would be pretty disappointing to see the studio neglect the one complaint fans seem to have about Season 1. Finally, I'd like to discuss the pacing and which arcs will likely get adapted after Stone Wars. So if you don't want any spoilers, then do not watch the rest of this video. To be clear, Stone Wars is a saga which started with the introduction of Hyuga and ends after the war with Tsukasa. Looking at Season 1, this season adapts roughly 60 chapters in 24 episodes. That's 2.5 chapters for every episode. If we assume Season 2 is 24 episodes and uses the same ratio, this means Season 2 would end with Chapter 120. Chapter 120 is right in the middle of what's known as the Treasure Island arc. Since it would be pretty silly to end a season in the middle of an arc, the reasonable conclusion is that Season 2 will actually end with Chapter 138. Not only is this chapter the end to the Treasure Island arc, but it's also the end to that respective saga. This saga ends on a major cliffhanger, which only supports the conclusion that Season 2 will end here in order to hype up Season 3. Now, if Season 2 ends with 138 and is still 24 episodes, this means it will adapt 3.25 chapters for every episode. Even if the season is 26 episodes, this still means roughly 3 chapters for every episode. And honestly, that sounds pretty reasonable. Some fans would argue that Season 1 was a bit slow, so to adapt more chapters into each episode might just be what the anime needs. Now, one might argue that the studio could end Season 2 on Chapter 100, the end of the Age of Exploration arc. That would mean each episode would adapt roughly 1.5 chapters and Season 2 would be even slower than Season 1. While this isn't unimaginable, I really hope that's not the case considering the studio can avoid this problem by adapting just one more arc. So, assuming Season 2 ends with Chapter 138, this season will not only present the epic battle between Senku and Tsukasa, but will adapt a total of 3 arcs and 1 whole saga. Not only that, but Season 2 will end with the biggest cliffhanger in the entire series. And that's it for this discussion. As you can tell, I can't wait for Season 2 of Dr. Stone. If you enjoyed this discussion, then make sure to like the video. If you'd like more videos like this one, then make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to follow along with weekly One Piece and Dr. Stone videos. Thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.